Okay, so welcome to everybody watching the Ars Electronica Festival 2020 at the moment. We are now live on our Gardens channel and welcoming Garden Milan by Meet Digital Culture Center, who have programmed some interesting sessions on virtual reality and on the ideas of a biotech society. So we are very happy to have them on board this year, joining the Ars Electronica Gardens. As we start off the session, I would like to briefly introduce Maria Grazia Mattei, who is the founder and director of Meet Digital Cultural Center. She's a journalist, an art critic, and a digital evangelist. She has been investigating digital culture since 1982 and has launched in 2018, together with the support of Fondazione Cariplo, one of the largest charitable foundations in Europe, Meet, the first Italian digital center for culture. Meet promotes meetings, exhibitions, workshops, and digital performances with a humanist perspective on innovation and digital transformation. In autumn 2019, Meet opened its building in the heart of Milan. So I would like to hand over to Maria Grazia now to talk a little bit about Garden Milan and the upcoming conversation with William Myers, who we will meet in a minute.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, world. I'm so happy to be here with you. And hello from Milano. So Meet is very happy, me too, to join the Ars Electronica Keplero Gardens this year program. It's a very interesting program. It's so full, so amazing, incredible, international, global, all. It's fantastic experience. Let me know just a few words. Meet is an international digital culture center, the first in Italy. So I'm happy also for that. And it's very interesting to start with you to announce this, maybe next overture, no maybe, the next overture 28 October in Milano, but also online with you. Anyway, Meet is also part of the STARTS family as a regional STARTS center. So this is another good news. So for this talk, about this talk, thank you to William to talk about this subject. Our Gardens team this year, I hope also to explore the other team with you the next time, next year, in the future too. Our team is hybridizing live experience, and explore how they are reshaping a lot of our activity are in between, not only physical, not fully virtual. We explore the topic through a set of activities to engage on-site and remote participants. If you want to know more about Meet Garden, feel free to join us tomorrow. Thank you, Christina. Tomorrow at 5 p.m. on Ars Electronica channel for a guided tour, a virtual guided tour. But now we are ready, no? We are ready to reflect on how to integrate and emulate a biological process into social transformation. This is the topic today. In few seconds, we have a chance to ask your question to one on the world, for me, leading expert on the integration of biology, creativity, and technology. John is Mr. Dr. William Myers. So thank you for tuning in, and I hope we meet soon at the Meet Center too, and I hope to see you for the next meeting with Ars Electronica in the next day. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, the world.
Hello.
There are some questions.
Wow, Maria Grazia, we have lots of questions coming from YouTube channel. So hello. I'm very pleased to introduce you to Dr. William Myers. Well, he's one of the leading experts on the integration. Not a doctor is saying, so it's very humble too. Is one of the leading experts of the integration of biology, technology, and arts, as Maria Grazia said. I would kick off with a question by myself. William, one of your amazing books was Biodesign, From Inspiration to Integration. Since, as Maria Grazia said, we're talking about hybridization. What do you think that the next step of biodesign will be?
The next phase?
Yeah.
Well, I think after the activity of the last 10 or so years with proliferation of student projects and experimental commercial projects that integrate biology in some new way, or sometimes it's termed bioprocessing, I think it's poised to proliferate even more, that other services, products we'll see in the coming years, and that policies to support them, to make them more economically viable, will also, I hope, be seen, such as in terms of carbon taxes or other things mentioned in the presentation, such as subsidy or a kind of encouragement of the kinds of activity, products, and services that support ecosystems.
Thank you. Oh, well, the first question coming from the YouTube channel is, how design or art can help to understand or discover the true nature of uncertainty for what it really is? It's a tough question, right?
Sure, the true nature of uncertainty. Well, we live with a degree of it all the time. Maybe, artists and designers shine light on how the uncertainties we face are sort of similar to what's come before, right? And how we face similar problems. We've all been undergoing or experiencing a digital revolution, and that for some has meant lots of benefits and liberation and connectivity, but it's also had all these unintended consequences, like the loss of privacy, increase in inequality, and the concentration of power in the hands of few people and companies. So I think observing that, some good art and design that is about biotechnology can reflect on that and say, like, can we do it better this time? Is this new revolution in technology, can it be better?
Thank you. Well, during your lecture, you mentioned public spaces, and the question rises from all points of the world, because we just experienced this in Italy, but all over the world, in Rins too, a lockdown that was impactful and in a sense of scary. So how can we embrace the fact that public spaces are changing in the sense of maybe more natural, connected because of bad things that happen to the world?
Well, it works differently in every place, but what I'm hoping for is that people become more aware that decisions have been made for them about how their space is divided and how they can use it. And they didn't necessarily sign on to that, and they weren't really part of the process of deciding, right? They weren't invited into the room or into the spaces where this is discussed. And if nothing at all, I think if people just realize that and begin to question and begin to find out who makes those decisions and how can I be part of them, that's a big positive. And then what I mentioned in my talk as well is that because we're at this moment of super high adaptability, it's worthwhile to just go out and experiment. Try to take over a parking space that's in front of your building. Try to find a space where you can put a bench or you can take a meal outside that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise, because now people are accepting of it. And so it's a great time for experimentation.
Yeah, and I think that as one of our watchers is saying, that we are really thinking about space and distance also through a cultural lens. So different countries has different perceptions and, you know, habits about spaces. For example, in Italy, we are very well, you know, aware and used to use our public space, our piazza, as, you know, a way to connect and network. So do you think that by place to place, by country, we can get new forms of aggregation because of what just happened?
I'm sorry, say the last part again.
Well, I'm saying that, for example, since you live in Amsterdam, you know very well that Dutch people have different perception of what public space is. And maybe since, well, we are going to hybridize our physical life in a place, but with digital experiences too, on a fluid path, what do you think that could be the next step, let's say, the next moment of what the meaning of what public space can be?
I think it can, in some ways, be hybridized. Like I think what you're getting at, this idea that the spaces could be digitally active more, not just, you know, not just a matter of what's allowed in what spaces, which is what I was bringing up, but the digital dimension to it, and maybe technologies like augmented reality and other monitoring and tracking technologies can somehow work to make public spaces function better. But I'm not sure about that. I will mention that there are efforts to make digital infrastructure a really serious part of all kinds of municipal planning through organizations like the Foundation for Public Code. This is a great resource for cities to look at for solutions on how to both save a lot of money and to make the services that rely on technology for citizens as part of their infrastructure work better.
Right. And talking about digital technologies and digital tools, they're, you know, very familiar to all of us. Person that is following us ask, don't you think that Zoom, the technologies we are using on our side, not yours, is simply bypassing the problems of physical and social interactions, such as bullying or mansplaining, instead of solving them? Well, maybe we are expecting maybe too much from digital technologies or social media, but yes, I think the question is nice because we are talking about, we are going abroad the simple fact that what we usually do physically, well, just transition to the digital arena. So maybe we had to tackle the inner issues of our society.
We do, and maybe, you know, this moment in the pandemic is an opportunity to reflect on what we've been losing slowly. Like we've been losing tactility, we've been losing all of the good social outcomes and personal psychological outcomes that come from being face to face with people. Maybe the greater awareness of that will help us to figure out some of these larger problems or some solutions to these larger problems that are on the horizon, like accelerated unemployment because of automation, or these kinds of larger structural problems that will lead people to need more care and more contact. We can design employment and training and what we want from social interaction based on knowing those needs a little bit better. I'm not sure that answers your question. But
yes, you did. I think that, yes, we had this amazing, discussion later, and it was just the point that where and how we can say that digital culture is part of the problem or maybe part of the solution, and people try, to be the digital team or the culture team, like we are, not fighting on, if we want to use the word fight, on the same ground. So I just waiting for new questions. I just want to ask you about your upcoming project of yours. So what are you doing in the next months?
Sure. So one thing that's really on the front burner is a project to organize the first show of BioArt that will be at the MIT Museum in Boston. This is planned to open in the spring-summer of 2022, and it will tell a few stories simultaneously, one being a narrative about how biotechnology has evolved over the last 20 years. And then at certain points, there'll be another narrative that comes through, which will reflect on those changes through art. So demonstrating what's been made possible because of these new emerging technologies, but also sometimes critiquing them or reflecting on what it means for the larger society that we can do things now like edit genetic material and understand different species or different non-human organisms in ways that we just never could before.
Yeah, and well, you just mentioned also part of what you are going to do, but I also would like to know how do you arrive, let's say, here? So would you give us a bit more of the background of William Myers, please?
Sure. How did I get to this place?
Yeah.
So
not exactly the meat, I mean.
Right. I know. I think it was, for me, the important turning point was in graduate school, looking at experimental design projects that were attempting to achieve sustainability. And some of them seemed radical. They were using biological matter. They were using new aesthetics that seemed so unlike what I was learning about in the history of design, like the precise aesthetics of mid-century modernism, for example. And I grew really fond of these projects. And I learned about a whole community of people that were organized around the activity of do-it-yourself biology. People that would just meet in their kitchens or their living rooms and tinker with organisms and make glowing bacteria and do things that were very safe and simple, but they helped open the doors of the imagination to thinking about what's this going to be in 20 or so years? Like, can we reliably design new organisms for all kinds of purposes, like making materials and fuels? And as I learned, the answer to that was yes, that time is coming. I became really motivated to write about this. So I found many projects, and that was the start of the first book, Biodesign, which led then to a second book, which resulted from the first bit of research, which helped me to encounter lots of works of art that were reflecting on or using this technology as well. So it wasn't just design. And I had enough of those projects that it became clear, oh, this deserved a book also. So it's been a kind of step-by-step, but that was the origin of it. And now the work with biodesign continues, and there's an appetite for it in classrooms in terms of lectures, for venues like museums. In the last 2 years, there've been a proliferation of new shows. There was the Nature Triennial at Cooper Hewitt. There was the Factory of Life show at the Pompidou Center in Paris. And then, of course, the Triennale here in Milano on Broken Nature.
Sure. And talking about the broken nature and, the relation between the nature and our society, I would, kick in an amazing interview that John Tucker, that was one of our Meet the Media Group guests, showed with us during the pandemic. It was so nice to send us a video saying, guys, keep living. And it's also suggested that we should get a new idea of relational ecology. And I'm quoting him, the fact that in our politics, as well as in our daily life, we need to rethink our relationship to place, reinvent politic and daily life based on ecological relationship. And I think that John Tucker was not thinking about ecological in, the mainstream way, but as as a biomimicry thing, as behaviors, our personal, and as on a community-based idea, as like to mimic what nature does. And I would like to listen to what you think. So are we going to a point where biology can turn into a political topic for maybe politicians in 5-10 years? So society that bio-based can be a matter, talking about polls and politicians and people going to express what they think on the ballot.
I think that's very possible. I've been observing that people really respond positively to this idea of valuing non-human organisms or non-human species in a more fundamental way, to respect the rights of what's happening in ecosystems and what's happening with other, with the non-human. So I think that's possible, but I do think we're still a long way from prioritizing it in the way that we would need to have meaningful outcomes that preserve, protect, or even rebuild some of those ecosystems that are lost. But to reflect on the notion of a bio-based society, like in the sort of symbolic sense or in the mimicry sense, I think it's desirable in some ways, and in other ways, it depends, because it's a matter of which species you observe. I wouldn't want to live in the same way that a honeybee does. But I think there are all these valuable lessons to learn from ecosystems in terms of how interdependencies between all kinds of animals and plants exist, and how they're dependent on one another. And those are sophisticated systems that, in their complexity and in their sustainability, they best just about anything that humans have created. So yeah, I think on that level, it would work, and it is desirable.
Thank you, William. Well, a new question from our watcher is, what about future perspective of the biodesign in the health system? So it's a huge question.
Sure, the systems that come to mind are those that would create food. For example, there are products now available like that some version of this has existed for a long time, but they're getting more advanced for you to grow your own flies or fly larvae for a food source. So with only feeding it a bit of water in a mechanism and some food scraps, you can have a basically limitless source of protein, or at-home aquaponics to grow like leaves for salad, and some herbs and small vegetables. I think this is certainly on its way, and it's part of biodesign, but it's also part of a larger trend of hyperlocalization, of trying to be self-sufficient within like only a few kilometers, if need be. Maybe the pandemic is increasing people's appetite for that kind of approach or technology.
Another question is, is mine, and is, I heard you say that the next biodesign will be machine learning. So would you explain this concept a bit more?
Sure. So biodesign continues to develop, and one of its features is that those that practice it, that make with biological systems, have to surrender a bit of control, as was mentioned in the presentation. That you have the designer, and you have the designers, you have the biological system, and then you have outcomes. And in the process, you're not quite able to predict exactly what the outcome is going to be. You don't have entire control over this other non-human thing that has its own agency. And so you have to iterate, and you have to be sort of patient and empathetic and see what comes out of that process. And with machine learning systems, they've gotten to a point where just tinkering with them, you can see that the complexity that's inside the sort of series of algorithms and data sets and how they work together is such that it's really difficult to grasp. And so when the outputs from these systems, sometimes they're puzzling, sometimes they're aesthetically interesting, sometimes they're just surprising, you're once again surrendering some control. And I think so there's that similarity of lack of control, but also the proliferation of it, the promise of it. In machine learning, I see it being similar to how people talked about biotech in the early 2010s or 2010, 2011.
Thank you. Well, we have another question about, well, the post-pandemic world. Do you think that the post-pandemic people, this is nice, will maintain their acquired habits, or they will take a step back to old habits?
I think most will return to old habits. I think people have been yearning so much for what their life was like before that the process of adaptation back to the stepping back will happen I think for a lot of people. But the larger issue is that is this desirable or not? I'm not sure. I think some people psychologically need it. I think it's underappreciated how people have been so isolated and lonely, and they're gonna need to work on that, and have a lot of social contact and have a lot of the life that they had before. It's necessary, but it's, I think, also a fair prediction that something like this is going to happen again. So we have to build resiliencies, and we have to be prepared to go into lockdown again. We have to be prepared to implement these sort of measures where work changes, socialization changes, phases of life transitions also change. Everything from marriage to graduation to having a child to losing a family member, all may change again.
I think that, well, being, more artistic to, well, I would say that also lots of practices, like creative practices, are changing a lot. We as MIT, we work a lot with artists and creators, and I know that you're tackling this theme, this topic of how to help these artists, creators, people that use digital tools in a, well, what we call humanistic approach to, leverage their arts, their practice is through digital. Would you like to, well, share something more with us about that?
Sure. So one of the ways that I've found that's effective with students to encourage them to take their steps in developing their practice or changing it or finding a new way to make something is to coach them on how they communicate, to give them some examples of what's the right way and the wrong way to, let's say, reach out to a biologist who's running their own lab, or to reach out to someone that's working at a company that's experimenting with a new material technology that you're interested in seeing a sample of for your, let's say, your school project. I find this quite helpful for them because there are all these signals I think they get that tell them that they have no right to reach out, or they're bothering someone if they ask, and so helping them through that is one of the ways.
Thank you, and that's also what we are trying to do with MIT and through our daily activities in Milan. I don't know if Maria Grazia has some questions to share with us. If not, I will go on and asking some new thing about how and when. Well, let me say that we went through a long path with you because we started interacting, it was January, and we invited you to come here to give a Meet the Media Guru talk on March 5th. And you all know what happened. Italy was locked down. And so we decided to go on a virtual platform to launch a new format. And you were the first guest speaker that gave us what we call the Meet the Media Guru Focus Online format. So it was a format that was based for a digital first experience. And it was so great because we had lots of people, more than 400 participants from 190 cities and more than 10 languages. And we were, oh my God, it's terrific. And the nice fact we just shared yesterday too was that we weren't prepared how much people needed in that special moment. It was April, a platform of sharing. Not only, you know, bad news, we had a lot of bad news, but also thoughts, and maybe also, you know, not easy thoughts, the one you share with us on what's the relation between nature and tech. And then we are again here talking with you on this topic as a part of the START program. And so I think that it is rising. It's not rising only for us that work in this field, but for society as a whole. So I would like to have your perspective on, you know, the Dutch side and also the American side, because you live in Amsterdam, but you are American. So maybe you can mix and hybridize, let's say, these different cultures and give us new, you know, insights of what's going on this topic that used to be very specific and maybe highly, high for, let's say, the mainstream.
Sure. So something that I've come to recognize that's a difference between a lot of the U.S. approaches to working with nature or considering the relationship between technology and nature, and that which I see in Dutch culture is that the American perspective tends to be much more given to a romantic view of undisturbed nature, which perhaps never actually existed, right? It's like that's just a kind of construct that there's this, you know, without humans environment that could somehow exist in a utopia. Whereas, you know, in the Dutch perspective, nature is this thing that periodically just tries to kill them or drown them. And that experience of history has been a lot different, to be in such low-lying land and to have to continually manage it, to reclaim where you live from the sea and be a constant threat. You don't tend to develop a romanticized vision of nature. And there's also not mountains and forests of the same scale as many other places. So I think that those differences inform somewhat greater openness on the Dutch side to these technologies and approaches. But what's interesting and still different and a bit contradictory about that observation is that in the US, there's more of a sort of a willingness to do experimentation genetically I think it's really for business purposes, because there's such a powerful lobby behind pharmaceutical companies and agriculture, which are the two major areas where this kind of work is done. So yeah, so it's a bit mixed, let's say, because the European standards are different. They're higher, they're just more restrictive.